Russian drones killed a 6-month-old baby in the Kyiv region and bombed a kindergarten with about 50 children in Kharkiv. The most powerful attack on Russia. For the entire time, 2 important oil refineries, a railway and airfields have been hit. Russia launched a Yars nuclear missile toward the US as part of exercises. Russian soldiers in Pokrovsk have been ordered to kill civilians. A shocking intelligence intercept. Hundreds killed as Ukrainian forces crushed Russian military units near Kupiansk. Ukraine is preparing Crimea for deoccupation. Shocking details of the upcoming special operation. Russia's Commissioner for Children's Rights confessed to her crimes on camera. Putin blatantly betrayed Trump. The meeting in Budapest has been cancelled. Hello, my name is Katerina Nestorenko. And right now, the main news. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose touch with you. On the vast expanse of YouTube, Russia killed a 6-month-old baby. A 12-year-old girl and a young woman in the Kyiv region. Their bodies were found at the site of a private house fire. These are the consequences of Russia's overnight attack. President Zelensky reported at least 6 dead and another 17 injured. The target of the strike was the energy sector, but there were many hits on residential buildings as well, including in Kyiv and Zaporizhia. The Kyiv, Odessa, Chernihiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Kirovohrad, Poltava, Vinnytsia, Zaporizhia, Cherkasy, and Sumy regions were affected. Emergency power outages have been implemented in some regions. In the morning, it became known that terrorists struck a kindergarten in Kharkiv at a time when 48 children were inside. The city's mayor, Terekov, reported that unfortunately there are injured children and the kindergarten itself has been completely destroyed. It's impossible to watch this footage without tears.
These subtitles were carefully created and provided by Dima Torzok, who has worked diligently to ensure that the dialogue is accurately represented for your viewing experience. If you are ready to continue, please feel free to proceed to the next part of the video or take any action you wish. Thank you for watching and go ahead at your own pace.
Come on, little one, where
are we going? I was just wondering if you know exactly where we are going at this moment.
Where to?
All right, for now, okay? I guess.
What did you say?
Also, as a result of the strike on Kharkiv, a man was killed. Our condolences to the families and loved ones of the victims. Russia is a country of murderers. I believe it should disappear from the face of the earth. And the killer Grandpa Putin should die in agony. Like this video, if you feel the same way. Let's send a request to the universe. We will not forget and we will not forgive. It seemed like we had already hit rock bottom long ago, but then someone knocked from below. To be precise, it was the Russian Children's Rights Commissioner, Maria Lvova-Belova, who knocked. Let me remind you, this is the official who, along with Putin, is accused by the civilized world of deporting Ukrainian children. And she personally, publicly admitted to abducting a Ukrainian boy named Philip from Mariupol. Belova kidnapped the child and took him to live with her family in Moscow.
So he didn't want to live in Russia. He didn't want to live in Russia, yes. How did you deal with that? With love? There was a real turning point. I remember it very well because he was always on pro-Ukrainian websites, reading basically all the propaganda there. While already in Moscow, of course, while he was in my family, he would just sit on the couch and watch. No, when I saw it, of course, I said, listen, come on, you've already moved to Russia. You need to somehow change your attitude. He would say, well, I always used to read them. And I said, son, at least do it for me. So we tried to work through it together, little by little.
Philip didn't want to live in Russia. The boy regularly read Ukrainian news and sang Ukrainian songs. Lvova-Belova. She is proud that over time she managed to turn the boy around. To break him.
What kind of rhetoric was it? I don't want to live in Russia or Ukraine. I don't want to live in...
Russia, yes, because, well, yes, I love Ukraine. He was always singing songs in Ukrainian. I said, what are you trying to provoke me with right now? with the fact that you sing songs in Ukrainian, but we're brotherly nations. A quarter of my blood and my children's is Ukrainian. I have a great attitude toward the language, the culture. Everything here is mixed together anyway. But he was constantly provoking.
To do such things and then talk about your crime so calmly. But the most terrible thing is that these crimes go unpunished, at least for now. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of you are watching us from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We Ukrainians are very grateful for your support and proud to have such reasonable viewers. Let us know in the comments under this episode as well, which country you're watching us from. And do people in your country support our struggle against the evil empire? I always enjoy reading your comments. And for now, we continue. Up next is the most interesting part. The defense forces have shown how we do not forgive. The SBU struck Russian airfields in the occupied Ukrainian territories, destroying 2 light aircraft that the Russians used to shoot down. Ukrainian drones. The SBU says that this attack clears the way for Ukrainian long-range drones and ensures uninterrupted explosions in the Russian rear. In addition, Russia has likely endured the largest combined attack in history. Also, during the night, footage began to appear of a fire near a station in the Bryansk region. Subsequently, the General Staff officially confirmed that the Ukrainian Armed Forces struck the Bryansk chemical plant with missiles, including a storm shadow that successfully penetrated Russian air defenses. But that's not all. During the night, drones struck an oil refinery in Makhachkala, Dagestan, more than 1,200 kilometers from the front line.
It's as if it wants to fall! It fell! It fell!
And even that is not the full list. Also during the night in Mordovia, the Saransk mechanical plant, which produces equipment and parts for the engineering and defense sectors, was attacked.
4 drones, 1 exploded and another.
In addition, a railway was also blown up in Russia. According to PSKO, to St. Petersburg, which is used for military logistics. Thank you to the Ukrainian Defense Forces for this work. This is better than any sanctions. 12 points. It is on this many sections that Ukraine and the EU are preparing a plan to end the war. This is reported by Bloomberg.
The peace plan needs approval from the US, and this week EU representatives may visit Washington to coordinate it. The plan rejects the renewed demands of the Russian dictator to the US that Kyiv cede territory in exchange for a peace agreement.
The plan also provides for a ceasefire, simultaneous halting of offensives by both sides, a prisoner exchange, and the return of deported children. Ukraine is promised security guarantees, funding for reconstruction, and an accelerated path to the European Union. Sanctions against Russia are to be gradually lifted, and the $300 billion in frozen Russian central bank reserves will only be returned after Moscow participates in reconstruction. But of course, Russia is not giving up on trying to push its own plan. Well, if you can call it a plan, it's more like a list of ultimatum demands. These conditions for a peace agreement with Ukraine were sent by the Russian Federation in a closed note delivered to the US this past weekend. This was reported by Reuters.
Moscow is once again demanding control over the entire Donbas, which means rejecting Trump's approach of freezing the front line. At the current positions.
In addition, another outlet, The Telegraph, reported that the meeting between Trump and Putin in Hungary has been cancelled. In my opinion, that was predictable. First of all, Russian officials were worried that Putin would simply be killed, either on the way there or at the location itself. There were even claims that the UK was preparing to assassinate the Russian dictator. And secondly, Poland stated that if Putin's plane flies over their territory, they will force it to land in order to arrest the Russian president. Because the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Putin back in 2023. What do you think? Did the bunker dweller get scared to fly to the EU? Do you think there are other reasons for refusing negotiations? And while Trump is hesitating with the tomahawks, still hoping that some kind of deal can be made. While trying to negotiate something with the Kremlin dictator, Putin is clearly trying to intimidate the US with his missiles. Russia conducted what they call scheduled nuclear force exercises. The Kremlin showed a video of nuclear saber rattling. The terrorists carried out a training launch of a Yars intercontinental ballistic missile, which is capable of carrying nuclear warheads. They launched the missile near the US borders to scare Trump even more. Putin personally observed the launch at the test site in Kamchatka. The Russians never let anyone doubt their status as terrorists, not even for a second. The GUR presented evidence of yet another Russian war crime. A Russian military officer gave the order to destroy civilians who were trying to leave the combat zone near Pokrovsk. This can be heard in the intercepted The order to execute civilians was given by one of the field commanders of the 30th Separate Motorized Rifle Brigade, which is part of the 2nd Combined Arms Army of the Central Military District of the Russian Federation. At present, the brigade is located in the vicinity of Pokrovsk. There is yet another piece of evidence that Russia is pure evil. And here is the situation at the front. The Russians have advanced in the Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk regions. Deep state analysts report that the enemy has occupied Poltavka. The Russians are also having success near Novotoretsk, Shakhove, Ivanivka, Okhotnichye, and Novovasilivka. Ukrainian military personnel are also reporting on the difficult situation in the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration.
The situation in the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad agglomeration is currently very difficult. This pocket is easily targeted both by artillery and drones, and getting into Mirnohrad itself is very difficult. That's the situation. It was obvious that such a large agglomeration would not be stormed head-on by the enemy, so they began to gradually bypass it, developing their success on the flanks.
Meanwhile, in the Kupiansk direction, Ukrainian pilots used aerial bombs to destroy an entire unit of occupiers, an ammunition depot, and the position of enemy drone operators. It is known that before the strike, Ukrainian soldiers successfully suppressed the enemy's air defense system, and thanks to coordinated deceptive maneuvers, they were able to evade interception attempts by Russian Su-35 fighter jets. And continuing on this topic, so to speak, the special military operation is going according to plan. The Kremlin's chief propagandist, Solovyov, has been accused of embezzling funds collected from Russians to support the army. In fact, Z-blogger Poznyakov published a post stating that Solovyov is pocketing hundreds of millions of rubles from fundraising for the army.
From the fighters and the special military operation, here are the buggies from Solovyov and his foundation that he provided to us. It's just metal, wood, and a motor cultivator. In the end, we didn't even bother sending this embarrassment to the front line. Now they're just sitting around rotting and rusting uselessly in the rear. This piece of crap would get stuck in the very first puddle. And its speed is very low, so every FPV drone will be after you. Solovyov just shot some flashy videos with this junk for his reports. You really screwed up on the cost price. But every fundraiser still collects 100 million.
Gentlemen, can you tell me why I'm not surprised at all? Well, it's a circus, honestly, and as they say, the show goes on, according to plan. In Russia, more and more factories are shutting down while the fighting continues at the front. Ukrainian fighters have successfully eliminated enemy positions. Trump announced new weapons, and France even declared it would purchase defense equipment for Ukraine. Germany is preparing to shoot down Russian drones, while another country has joined the Porel initiative. Meanwhile, Russia continues to strike peaceful Ukrainian cities. Details about what is happening on the battlefield are in our report.
What is that? Mom! Mom!
It was a restless night in Bataysk-Rostov region, and the drones made it there too, on the night of October 21st.
We've lived to see this, damn. I was so afraid this would come to us, and now it has.
It is reported that Bataisk is a major railway and sorting hub. But what's even more interesting is that now Russians themselves are suggesting where Ukrainian drones should fly.
Guys, the Kremlin isn't actually here. But it's the Kremlin that really needs to be hit. You got the coordinates wrong.
Meanwhile, the largest Orenburg gas processing plant and the Novokubishevsk oil refinery completely halted operations after the Ukrainian drone attack. Although in Russia itself they say something different.
In Orenburg, it's a classic case. The Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations denied there was a fire at the gas plant, but immediately sent firefighters there to put out the blaze. Of course, in Russia, that's been banned for a long time now. When everything is burning, well, according to the reports, everything is calm.
And the plants will resume operations, but probably not anytime soon. After all, as reported, restoration work won't begin until at least the start of November.
So what's the main objective? To paralyze as many energy facilities in the Russian Federation as possible. To create an imbalance? For example, to disable as many facilities as possible in the central part of the Russian Federation, which is exactly what's happening now. These are substations of all kinds. Facilities located in other regions of the Russian Federation experienced oversaturation. They were overloaded.
Minus 13 occupiers. Special Operations Forces fighters infiltrated behind enemy lines and destroyed enemy positions. Meanwhile, Trump made an announcement about a new secret weapon.
There are weapons that many people don't even know about, and I started this 4 years ago.
Of course, Trump couldn't help but emphasize the superiority of the US over China, including in terms of military technology.
The US has a lot of developments, a wide variety of weapons of all kinds. Once again, these are developments that are at various stages of implementation. Some are already in the final stages, some are only halfway there, and some are just being planned on paper. But due to the economic superiority of the US, they really do have, once again, a lot of potential developments of various kinds. Again, scale is an issue here. They can produce 1 or 2 prototypes and boast that they already have them. But here, the question is about quantity.
Meanwhile, as Russian drones continue to violate European airspace, the Chancellor of Germany announced the creation of a federal unit to combat drones and a center for UAV protection.
This is a good sign. It's a good sign that at least something is being done in Europe to counter the Russian threat, because no one knows what to do about Russian drones, but here at least some steps have been taken. How they will be implemented, when they will be implemented, how quickly, how effectively, remains to be seen, but in any case, it's a positive development. This shows that they understand, they are aware of the threat, they realize that right now they don't have the resources.
Meanwhile, the French Foreign Ministry announced that Ukraine will receive a loan from the EU to purchase defense equipment for the next 3 years.
But let's be honest. Putin's presence on the territory of the European Union only makes sense if it leads to an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. Moreover, Vladimir Putin is interested in adopting the principle of an immediate ceasefire because time is working against him.
In the Pearl program. Previously, Italy refrained from participating and had its reasons for doing so. But now the country's position has been revised.
Perhaps when Italy first refused to participate in this program, they thought the project wouldn't take off, that it was unviable, that it wouldn't last. Frankly, that's complete nonsense. But upon closer inspection, it turned out that it is taking off, it's being funded, and some interesting developments are emerging. The countries participating in these developments gain access to technologies and exchange data with Ukraine, and it's quite possible that some kind of jealousy was at play in Italy.
Russia continues to strike peaceful Ukrainian cities. On the night of October 21st, 6 Russian KABs hit Kharkiv. It is known that 11 people were injured. In Kherson, 3 people were injured as a result of a drone attack. And Chernihiv, after a drone attack, was left completely without electricity and water.
I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They hold the front and stand against a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine, and if you can't do so financially, write them words of encouragement in the comments. I know they're watching us. Ukraine is actively preparing the Crimean Peninsula for deoccupation. Now, for Russians and collaborators, living and working in Crimea is becoming unbearable. Even diesel fuel has already disappeared from gas stations. And the successful attacks by the armed forces of Ukraine on Russian military radars make it possible to further destroy the occupiers' fuel and military infrastructure. Next, let's talk about what awaits the residents and occupiers on the seized peninsula in the near future.
After a long, difficult, and incredibly arduous journey, Crimea and Sevastopol are returning to their native harbor.
And that harbor is Ukraine. Crimea is being cut off from the Russian Federation, and the collapse of the Crimean Bridge is just a matter of time, according to Western publications. There is already a total fuel crisis on the peninsula. Some areas have been left without electricity. There isn't enough air defense even for the most important sites, and those that remain in the chaos are already shooting down their own aircraft.
We note that, as a military base, Crimea is becoming increasingly inconvenient and problematic for Russia, primarily because there is no reliable source of water available.
So the last few days have marked a new reality of life on the peninsula. The key event was a series of strikes in the area of Vardiiske, where after precise hits, the largest oil depot in the area caught fire. According to locals, the burning base in Gvardeyskoye could be seen from the Simferopol suburb of Zarevo for many kilometers.
Guards. There was an attack not only on the oil depot, but also on the military airfield and also on the Russian garrison located there.
According to information online, an ammunition depot on the garrison's territory was also hit. In addition, the oil depot near Feodosia has also partially ceased operations due to several attacks. Just this month, 11 fuel tanks were completely destroyed, as evidenced by satellite images.
There's a very important story about the Feodosia oil depot. What is it? That it didn't just burn down on its own. It burned down along with the fuel that was stored in those tanks. And that will be very difficult to restore. It's not clear what was there, diesel fuel or gasoline. But if it was gasoline, which is more likely, it means that the crisis this week in occupied Crimea will be much worse than it was the week before. So, we wait?
At the same time, each such strike is notable for the fact that it's almost impossible to extinguish the fire. Experts say that the burning fuel spreads across the facility, igniting neighboring tanks. And so, the fire can go on for days.
The landscapes of Feodosia adorn almost the entire eastern part of Crimea. They say the flames can be seen from 30 and in some places even 50 kilometers away. They say everything is burning to the ground. The facility needs to be shut down. This is a recommendation for the occupying Crimean authorities, who have also confirmed that there will be no gasoline.
There will be no diesel either, local authorities add. So, since the beginning of the week, diesel fuel has also disappeared in Crimea, local activists report. Under these circumstances, the promise of the occupying head of Crimea, Sergei Aksyonov, to stabilize the fuel supply situation is simply impossible to fulfill, added Z propagandist Alexander Sergeyev. At the same time, the authorities are desperately trying to hide the real picture of what is happening in Crimea. Thus, just over the past weekend, police officers drew up at least 4 administrative reports against residents of the peninsula. This was due to posts on social media. People in particular were outraged by the lack of fuel. Interestingly, Russians themselves are partly helping the Ukrainian Armed Forces to identify targets in Crimea. Experts have analyzed that now you can simply find them by opening maps on the internet.
Remember when Yandex.Maps started blurring all sorts of strategic sites? I said that now it's absolutely clear where exactly to strike. So my friends, the people at Inform Napalm noticed that the Special Operations Forces did exactly that. The territory of the oil depot in Vardiiske was blurred on Yandex, but for some reason that didn't help against the strikes. It's a mystery. Once again, thanks to all the Russian decisions that help increase the effectiveness of Ukrainian strikes. Blurring military sites on Yandex.Maps is definitely one of them.
Another decision that contributes to the regular strikes in Crimea is the work of the defense forces targeting Russian air defense sites on the peninsula. Just recently, the GUR managed to strike the occupiers' newest radar system. We're talking about the Valde complex, which was developed to detect small drones.
The SBU continues to systematically reduce the enemy's military, logistical and economic capabilities. To do anything at all. both in occupied Crimea, in other occupied territories, and even on Russian territory itself. But Crimea suffers the most, because the air defense system there was deliberately destroyed, reducing their ability to defend themselves. And now we're working as if inside the body.
By the way, just so the occupiers in Crimea don't get the impression that everything will work out for them, along with oil depots and military equipment, the Ukrainian Armed Forces also didn't forget about the equipment that supplies electricity to Russian bases. In several regions of the peninsula, Ukrainian defenders organized blackouts.
At night in Crimea, several electrical substations were put out of commission, including the main substation in Jankoy or Jankong, as we used to call it in Crimea. That's what we called it. So now, rolling blackouts are being introduced both for electricity and for Putin. Here, it's being shown very clearly once again that if he continues to strike Ukraine's energy infrastructure, the occupiers in Crimea will be left without electricity and fuel.
And here's the cherry on top. During one of the latest attacks, Russian air defense crews got so nervous that they started firing at everything in sight. As a result, one less Russian fighter jet worth about
$50 million is a huge amount of money. With this much, you could buy several luxury homes, invest in successful businesses, or support important causes for many years. This sum has the power to change lives, create opportunities, and make a real difference in the world.
At the same time, there's no good news for the occupiers when it comes to air defense. Analysts note that recently there have been more strikes on Russian territory as well. To protect it, a decision was made to partially redeploy air defense systems from Crimea back to Russia.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
In Russia's poorer regions, recruitment of contract soldiers is failing due to heavy losses and low pay. This is reported by the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine.
It is noted that the worst situation is in the poorest regions, such as the Republic of Sakha, Yakutia. And according to internal documents from the Russian Ministry of Defense, the average recruitment rate at selection points in Yakutia is about 40% of the quotas set by Moscow. The reasons cited are insufficient regional payments as well as the reluctance of local authorities to actively support recruitment. In addition, intelligence notes that the failure of the campaign was also influenced by significant losses among the local population, particularly among ethnic groups such as the Yakuts, Evenks, and Evens, who do not wish to fight for Moscow's interests.
Meanwhile, the Kremlin is trying to compensate for the shortage of military personnel by actively recruiting foreigners. As of now, it is known that at least 270 mercenaries from Kazakhstan who fought on the side of the Russian Federation have been killed or are missing. What do you think? Such, to put it mildly, not positive. Will the mobilization dynamics in Russia somehow force the Kremlin to sit down at the negotiating table? Leave your comments. I always read them. While Washington can't decide whose side it's on, Europe has no time for wavering. The old world is firmly supporting Ukraine and is preparing a series of crushing measures to bring down Putin's regime. If not on the battlefield, then certainly economically. On Thursday, they are expected to adopt the 19th package of sanctions. And at this very moment, the European Union countries are preparing for a complete rejection of Russian gas and are making key decisions regarding the frozen Russian billions. All the details are in our report.
Europe is demonstrating determination. 3 major decisions are coming in the very near future. A new package of sanctions, a rejection of Russian oil and gas, and even the use of Russian assets. The EU is tightening its pressure on Russia because it knows that the terrorist state only responds to force.
We see Trump's efforts to establish peace in Ukraine. Of course, all these efforts are welcome, but we do not see that Russia is truly striving for peace. Russia only understands force and negotiates only when it is truly compelled to do so. That is why, of course, we are discussing what else we can do.
The new package of sanctions in the EU will be approved as early as Thursday, October 23rd. This is the conviction of the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Defense, Kaja Kallas. The package will differ from the previous ones. The restrictions will affect 3 key areas at once: energy, financial services, and trade. The change in approach to sanctions was already mentioned at the beginning of October by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. According to her, the EU will no longer propose phased sanctions, but instead wants tougher measures. However, quick results should not be expected. The new restrictions are designed for the long game.
It can't be said that the 19th
package of sanctions, which is still expected to be adopted this week, is truly groundbreaking, since a number of measures have a delayed effect. For example, the refusal of Russian LNG starting from 2027. And we have to understand, we're in October, the 25th, so that's still more than a year away, a transition period.
Things did not go smoothly with this package. The main obstacle, as unexpected as it may seem, turned out to be Austria. Vienna had previously refused to agree to the adoption of new restrictions unless the European Union unblocked part of the Russian assets for compensation, specifically to compensate Austria's Raiffeisenbank for fines imposed by a Russian court. But no one supported Austria's demands, and the Austrians radically changed their position. Surprisingly, they are not going to block the new package. Not even Hungary.
We have no plans to block it. We managed to remove all measures that would contradict our national interests.
Trump's actions. His notable successes in the Middle East, achievements that have been observed and discussed by many, together create an additional and important political backdrop. This situation also provides a certain incentive for some of his opponents, especially those within the European Union itself, to be more reserved and cautious. As a result, these individuals are now more likely to talk less openly about the idea of blocking anti-Russian sanctions, since the current political climate within the EU makes such discussions more sensitive and complex. For example, we see that Hungary has ultimately given in, well, obviously here, the direct relationship between Orban and Trump.
But while Hungary did not block the 19th package of sanctions, it did try to influence the decision to abandon Russian gas and oil, just like Slovakia did. The day before, the EU Council supported a complete rejection by the European Union of the use of Russian fossil fuels. The decision was supported by an overwhelming majority of votes, except for Hungary and Slovakia. However, their votes were not that important.
Fundamental decisions must be made by consensus. That is, all 27 members of the European Union must say yes at once. But for a number of issues, a qualified majority is sufficient. This means 55% of European Union member states, representing more than 65% of the population of the European Union. Therefore, in this case, we understand that a number of issues are still being shifted to the qualified majority level.
The proposal in question provides for a legally binding ban on any imports of gas from Russia, including liquefied natural gas, after January 1st, 2028. At the same time, imports of new gas from Russia will be prohibited starting January 1st, 2026. However, for existing contracts, a short transitional period is provided until June 2026. Long-term contracts are allowed until the beginning of 2028. The EU Council, as we already mentioned, supported the proposal despite two obstacles. Now the matter is up to the European Parliament. It must approve the document. But that's not the only blow to the economy of the aggressor country. In addition to future revenues, Europe also plans to seize the Kremlin's current funds. This refers to the frozen Russian assets. Part of this money is planned to be spent on providing a loan to Ukraine.
This is not about confiscation. In other words, they are working out exactly such a way that will allow the use of the principal of these assets, but at the same time not confiscate them. That is, if, or rather when, the Russian Federation pays reparations to Ukraine, accordingly, access to these assets will then be restored.
As Western publications report, work on this issue intensified after the talks between Trump and Zelensky. On October 17th, allegedly, the president of Ukraine was pressured by the American leader. And in the EU, it seems they decided to become more assertive so that they would also be taken into account. Already this week, politicians will try to reach an agreement on the use of frozen Russian assets.
They will definitely discuss it. I don't expect any decisions yet, since there is still time. According to previous agreements. But it's clear that for the budget years 2026 to 2027, it will be necessary to adopt serious consolidated options. And we perfectly understand that there is no other way out for the West right now, except to ultimately go down the path of a reparations loan for Ukraine. There simply isn't another option, since funding is truly needed. Enormous.
Will European politicians be able to reach an agreement? That's an open question, but Europe's determination in its recent actions gives hope. The EU is not going to unconditionally heed Trump, but is ready to help and take action.
Everything is stable in Russia. There they decided that the song by the opposition Russian artist Noize MC, Svítla Smuga, discredits the army since Ukrainians listened to it during drone attacks.
As reported by Rotondi, the head of the court press service Daria Lebedeva, the police included a quote from Noize MC's social media in the protocol. A fan of the artist wrote to him saying that he played the track Svítla Smuga in Kyiv during a drone attack and felt the artist's support. Thus by Alexev and A. Not only through the song Svítla Smuga itself, but also through comments regarding its release. A negative perception of the Russian Federation's special military operation is being formed in society, according to the protocol.
But Noize MC is a Russian rapper who actively speaks out against the war. In February 2022, he left Russia, after which he was declared a foreign agent. Meanwhile, in Russia, as we can see, they are still fighting against the artist's songs that speak out against Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine. Well, what can you say? The circus has left, but the clowns remain. What do you think of our news? Let us know what we should change to become better. We will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, please like this video to support what we do. And be sure to subscribe to our channel, Ukraine Today, so you don't miss future episodes. See you soon!